On my clock, it is 9 o'clock. We're still waiting for Commissioner Baldwin.
Yes, I think so.
Has anybody text her?
Yeah, I'm double checking. Michaela, did you send her a commission address, I assume?
I sent it to the one I was provided. It looks like it might be a personal one.
Yeah, that's the email. I just double checked.
Okay, it looks like we have Commissioner Baldwin on now. Okay, Commissioner Baldwin, are you on now?
There we are.
See your name there.
Are we ready to go?
I think so.
Okay. Let's get started then. Welcome, everybody. This is the Bi-State Polling Subcommittee meeting. It is Wednesday, August 26th, 2026. And in attendance are the commission members are Commissioner J.C. Baldwin and Commissioner Matt Ransom of the Washington Commission, Commissioner Jeff Baker and Lee Byer of the Oregon Transportation Commission. Any commission members, I think that will do as an introduction. Does any commission members have any comments before we get started? I am not seeing any. All right. So the first item we have is approval of the meeting summary meeting or minutes whatever you want to call them, notes from the last meeting. I found them fine. Does anybody have any comment about that? Seeing none, then they will stand approved as presented. Let's see here. Item we have on our agenda is public comment. Michaela, do we have any public comment?
I will take a look now. If there's anyone, oh, it looks like we have someone. I will promote them over right now.
Okay, I cannot see from my screen who raised their hand, but I show two attendees.
Yes, one of them is not named. I'm trying to promote them.
Okay, while you're doing that, I will public comment. If you wish to sign up for public comment, click on the raised hand icon. When you're called upon, you will be invited to join as a panelist and will be provided 3 minutes for public comment. The Bi-State Polling Committee welcomes all viewpoints and requests speakers be courteous, respectful, and comply with the time limitations. Please submit any written comments to info@bystatessubcommittee.org. I'll repeat that. It's info@bystatessubcommittee.org. Okay, so the first one that shows up on my screen it shows up as ePhone 2. I don't know who that is, but you're on. Michaela, if you let him on.
Well, good morning. Eric Ufer here. Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you and see you. Would you like to give your name for the record, please?
Yes, I will. My name is Eric Ufer.
Welcome, Eric. We'd love to hear what you have to say. You got 3 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your guys' work, by the way. So good morning. My name is Eric Ufer. I'm on the board of directors of Jansen Beach Mortgage, JBMI, the largest floating home community west of the Mississippi River, representing 177 floating home slips directly adjacent to this project. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself, but likely echo the views of Hayden Island community, including JBMI homeowners, residents, businesses, employees, and the many people who depend on the island every day. I keep hearing the word equity used in discussing this project, but I struggle to understand how the proposed tolling plan is equitable for Hayden Island. We live on an island with virtually no essential services of our own. We must cross the bridge for medical care and many other basic necessities, yet under the proposed system, simply accessing those necessities could mean paying a toll. The inequity also extends to the people who work here. Many Hayden Island businesses depend on employees who live in Washington and commute onto the island, often for relatively low-wage jobs. Asking those workers to pay a toll simply to get to and from work creates significant financial burden. We already are hearing from multiple businesses that tolling could make it so difficult to retain employees and customers that they may simply close their doors. How is it equitable for transportation project to potentially cost our community additional businesses, jobs, and services? At the same time, Washington residents will have no free southbound route to visit Hayden Island businesses. This creates another competitive disadvantage for Oregon community, whose businesses have historically depended heavily on customers from both sides of the river. And our community is being asked to absorb far more than tolls. For years, we will live with major construction, noise, pollution, barges, disruption along the river. The Columbia River is effectively our backyard and an important part of why many of us choose to live here. Boating, paddling, foiling, fishing, and simply enjoying the river will all be affected during this decade-long construction. We understand that this bridge is important to the entire region. We're not asking Hayden Island to be exempt from contributing to a regional solution. We're simply asking that equity actually means equity. So this is my question. Before tolling decisions are finalized, will the IBR program conduct a publicly present a specific economic and equity analysis of the cumulative impact on Hayden Island residents, Washington employees commuting to island jobs, island businesses, customer access, and the loss of normal use and enjoyment of our riverfront, and then provide a meaningful toll relief or mitigation based on those findings? I believe we should have an exemption to the toll. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspective. Let's see here. Is there anybody else who wishes to sign up?
Yes, there is
It-
another person, Joshua Landry. I've just promoted him and he'll be coming up soon.
Good morning, Joshua. You're on. You have 3 minutes. We appreciate your comments.
Right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Joshua Landry. I'm on the High Noon, which is the neighborhood Hayden Island. I'm a director of the Hayden Island Neighborhood Association. I'm also a director at Jansen Beach Mortgage, as is Eric. I will lose my home as long with my low-income neighbors because this project. There in October. There was a community action group, Northeast Portland. They were worried that when they were told that diversionary traffic would turn 205 into a parking lot. So ODOT used the Hampton Roads study, Hampton Roads, Virginia, to sort of assuage some of their fears. Now, buried in that study, there is a place called Portsmouth, Virginia. So in that area, Portsmouth was toll locked, so much like Hayden Island is. And in that study, they asked the people if they still went to Portsmouth, and 49% of them said they no longer visited Portsmouth because of the tolls. If we lost 49% of our traffic from Vancouver, which we heavily rely on, that will collapse the economic base of the island. We'll lose things like our grocery stores and things like that, and turn it into a food desert. So things like that have a very large impact on us. It won't matter to me. I'll lose my home. So, for me, it doesn't matter. It won't matter because I won't live here anymore. I'll be out of my community. But anyways, yeah, I thought I was going to wing it and I was just winging it. So I think that's everything. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Joshua. Okay, Michaela, do we have anybody else?
It does not look like anyone else has their hand raised. If
Okay,
anyone
yeah,
would like
yeah.
to provide comment, please raise your hand now. If not, we can move on. It looks like, oh, we got one
Looks like-
more.
Oh, one more. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Richard, I am promoting them right now.
And again, for those listening, if you wish to comment, raise your hand.
Looks like Richard is joining right now to provide comment.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Richard Sorum. I am a 20-year resident of Hayden Island at Jansen Beach Mortgage. And as Joshua and Eric so eloquently stated, that the tolling for our community will be devastating to business and residents and the like. And right now, Hayden Island is struggling with other issues that would, I believe, increase tremendously if the tolling was how should I say, economically unfeasible for most of the residents. So my question or my statement would be, the residents and businesses should have some sort of a better rate of tolling to going to and from their businesses, and most likely and most importantly to their homes. My home, like Joshua, excuse me, will also be relocated or deconstructed or whatever. So I will not be a resident here at that time when the bridge does go through. But I just wanted to share my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Richard.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
Michaela, is that it?
Looks like that is it. No one else has their hand raised.
Okay, last chance for anybody out there tuning in. If you want to speak, now's your chance. Raise your hand. Not seeing anybody, so we will close public comment and move on. Our next item is the commission's guidance regarding by-state tolling subcommittee work plan considerations. And Carl, I think you have this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will take this from here. My name is Carl Z. I'm Deputy Director for the Washington State Transportation Commission, and along with Travis Brower with ODOT, we will be working to provide you guidance here, relay the Commission's guidance that you received in July regarding their intent for the request to support their considerations in the future, and how the Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee can provide guidance on that work, and also related work plan considerations. So we can go to the next slide. I'll kick this slide off and then shift to the OTC, the Commission's guidance document, to review that with you. But wanted to set this up as that the work plan that we're proposing for you to review today really is in support of providing that guidance that has been requested by the full commissions. So with that in mind, and Travis will walk you through that work plan here after I talk you through the guidance. Michaela, if you could click on that guidance link. This is as posted on the commission's website because following it being approved by the full commissions in July. And this follows up a discussion of the joint commission meetings in June of this year that really identifies some topics for further discussion by the Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee in support of deliberations and selection of toll rate and policy options for public input and engagement in the summer of 2027, really leading up to, ahead of that, the next joint commission meeting coming up in, we anticipate January of 27. The topics here are first, toll setting guidance. So based on the 4 scenarios, and we'll review those scenarios here later in the meeting, that were assessed as part of the Level 3 Traffic and Revenue Study for the IBR program. They're seeking guidance on options for 3 topics, options for pre and post completion tolling, implementation of low-income discount, and also toll rate escalation options. These are your work could include this or look at additional topics, but these were ones that were called out by the full commissions. Second, they're seeking to a review of current analysis. This includes reviewing assumptions and inputs for the current toll rate scenarios to inform rate setting considerations. Assumptions and inputs for review include the toll rate amounts and proposed hourly schedule of variable toll rates for weekdays and weekends, current potential financing options identified by the IBR program for Washington State and Oregon, as well as current traffic volume forecasts prepared for financial planning and environmental analysis purposes for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. I'll note that in this presentation, in the meeting here today, we've worked to begin providing you a review on both the toll rate amounts, the first bullet and the third bullet. So the toll rate amounts and proposed hourly schedule for the variable hourly toll rates, as well as the traffic volume forecasts. And we'll expand on that here as those presentations are come up here later in this meeting. In addition, the guidance from the full commissions is to address further potential assessments to support the eventual decision-making by the full commissions. So this would be potentially, as in assessing the toll rate scenarios, further assessment of alternative options for toll rates and policy choices, as constrained to the menu of options in the current 4 scenarios. So the elements of those scenarios that you see that have been put forward. In addition, considering potential changes to existing scenarios must maintain financial sufficiency, and in doing so, confirm financial sufficiency for any preferred scenarios that are put forward. We've been continuing to, at a staff level, work through timelines and options for for supporting that work, and we will can address that a little further here as we have any discussion. And finally, the full commissions are seeking guidance on public input and engagement on the approach for that work as we move into summer towards our timeline for having really robust public engagement and input on these options. The full commissions want to review the approaches that have been discussed to date and support really refining that for that work as we get ready for that in the next summer. So that's the breadth of the guidance that's been provided by the full commissions. As I say, we have prepared a work plan to support addressing these topics, but also want to ensure to see if there's any discussion or further consideration by you commissioners on what's been put forward by the full commissions. It's not meant to be necessarily limiting to the topics that you can address as a bi-state tolling subcommittee, but are identified as topics that would support the full commissions, yourself and your colleagues in coming to decisions as we move into next year.
Are there any questions or comments from the commissions?
Chair, I have a comment and maybe a question. I'm not exactly sure where to put this in, but maybe this would be a good time. In terms of the options, I mean, we've learned a great deal about this project since it began, and our traffic flow analysis, our funding, many things have changed, and I'm really particularly concerned about traffic diverting to I-205 and onto the Portland streets, and also adding congestion out to our transportation hub at Portland International Airport. It's just not passengers, but a great deal of freight. And so we're going to be pushing, we now know we're going to be pushing a lot of traffic into that 205 system. I think it would be worthy to consider tolling on the Glen Jackson Bridge. I think it could really make a major step forward in terms of reducing the diversion. And also it might give us an opportunity to lower our tolls or pay back the project faster. So somewhere in here, I think it would be a worthy consideration to add that as a possibility. So it may be a little early in the conversation, but it might be germane to a lot of things that we're talking about.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will say that I've been working on this project since about 2011, 2012. I was involved in the legislature in approving the project on the Oregon side in 2013. But all that time, I have been told that it wasn't possible to toll the Jackson Bridge, that the federal law was against that. And specifically, there's, I believe, a Washington statute that prohibits that. But I've been told lately that possibility is there, but I guess it would take a change in Washington law and approval of the feds to do that. So
If I may add,
I think it's an intriguing idea. Carl, you have comment?
If I may add, you're correct. The current state law in Washington State prohibits consideration of prohibits tolls on Interstate 205 in Washington State, including the bridge. And so that is currently, that's why it's not in the scope of considerations for the analysis. If that was to change, that would open up a different consideration, but the scenarios that have been addressed and put forward in our current deliberations do not include the scope of tolling on Interstate 205. Some of the information you'll see today does speak more to the analysis that's been done for the corridor, both for federal environmental purposes as well as for tolling purposes. So we'll review information that speaks to both 205 and I-5 here today. But in terms of the scope of considerations, right now it's not something that we could pursue on the Washington State side unless that law was changed.
Chair Byer, I just before we leave this, if this was if the commission, if our by-state tolling commission thought that this was worthwhile to pursue, and Carl, maybe you could answer this question too. What would be the mechanism to do that? Could we make a recommendation to WashDOT that they approach the legislature and have them, based on all the new information we have, reconsider that position? The timing becomes really important here because as we look at this diversion issue, it would be better to stop the diversion issue in its tracks rather than getting way down the road and trying to adjust. So I sense a sense of urgency, and also I'm kind of compelled to lean on it just a little bit to see if there might be a mechanism. And again, this is just based on everything that we now know that we didn't know. I mean, even last year at this time. So it might be really worthwhile for the Washington legislature to take a look at what's happening with regard to diversion, particularly out to the east side of Portland and down into Clackamas County. And so I'd just hate to see it go by without teeing it up and taking a shot. If the rest of my fellow members of this commission feel it's important.
I would say that as an approach to that would be, if there is that interest, and again, we'll talk through some of the analysis that's been done here today, both for the federal environmental purposes that addresses the corridor, as well as what's been done in support of the tolling work. But if there is that interest as we work through this summer and fall from the Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee, I would say that'd be guidance to provide to your full commissions, whether you wait to do that until in alignment with the other guidance you're providing or sooner, but to seek the support from your full commissions in providing some form of advice and guidance to the legislature, input to the legislature on where that stands. At least I think that's my preliminary thought of how we'd approach it on the Washington side. That therefore you're having that come from the commissions, not necessarily having to put that through WashDOT as a consideration.
Commissioner Ransom?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So being a Clark County East Side resident, I can say, Commissioner, I'm very familiar with the topic, and I believe some of the discussion and the hypothesis is based on anecdote, some based on data. I hear it even was in my neighborhood about, the potential implications of tolling I-5 versus 205, et cetera. So I think it's a question that I'm not averse to, but I think within the framework of the task at hand, I believe it's something that would be, if I'm understanding the work program, further study needed category. And like many things, there are going to be items, even those that we heard comments earlier today in the public forum around exemptions or carve-outs or considerations. I think there are a host of these that we should give at least earnest review and accept the statement as a statement of belief, if not fact, and give it some consideration. With that said, I believe, Carl, within the framework of what the Washington Commission can do, it would need to be identified as further study needed, and subject to whatever process would follow along. So I think, again, just to reiterate the observation, very aware of the conversation, very aware of what people's perceptions would be in terms of their belief of future real world impact. And I think it is worthy of at a minimum, standing up a robust monitoring program, and then both states being willing to proactively or reactively respond is warranted, and within the framework of what we're allowed to do via statute, et cetera. So I think it's an important question to at least have on the table at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Baldwin, do you have any comment?
Oops. Excuse me. Thank you. Only in that I concur with Matt. I think it's an important question that needs to be answered. But again, I believe there needs to be some further study where we can move forward with it.
Thank you. Well, my perspective on it would be that it seems like doesn't seem to be like there's a whole lot that's going to happen unless the legislatures decide that they want to look at that. There is an oversight committee, joint oversight committee, and perhaps flagging this issue to them to see if they have any appetite for it would be an appropriate thing to do. I'm not sure how we do that. Yeah. Maybe we could just raise it with them. All right. Any other comment on that? Commissioner Baker, anything else?
Sorry to mess up your schedule in the first 10 minutes of our conversation.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So
And I'll say, one topic we've heard from commissioners in terms of considerations for assessment is consideration of the timing of the low income discount, whether it'd be possible to have that be implemented. What would be the impacts of implementing that as soon as possible? For example, on the one scenario that's been that was presented in June, I should say, with full financial sufficiency analysis, which was scenario 2. We'll touch on that here later. That was presented as scenario 2 has that as a low income discount starting when the new bridge opens. Hearing to date, there's been interest as it's been presented in other scenarios to have that happen as soon as possible as a consideration. We have got the wheels turning on some work to test the impacts of that for being able to provide that some feedback as soon as our next bi-state tolling subcommittee meeting. So putting that out there is to see if there's any feedback on that. But we want to get the wheels turning on that item as a potential point of consideration for you all as we come back together at our next bi-state tolling subcommittee meeting.
Well, I'm pulling out of memory here, but I thought our last discussion on that was the inclination of our group was that we would want to implement that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But the comment about waiting until construction was complete was driven by the administrative constraint of not being able to implement it. So I think we have a general recommendation to implement as soon as possible.
There's a sense that there's an interest there, to be sure, and that's where the staff we wanted to work with WashDOT to see about bringing forward that assessment, or at least testing that potential on
Okay.
the revenue side. It will be some initial take, but it could support some further guidance from the bi-state tolling subcommittee going forward. Would be the intent.
Okay.
Chair, I think the testimony, the public testimony today was really compelling with regard to this subject. And I mean, it's isolated to Hayden Island, but we heard 3 people come forward and talk about the impact on low-income workers on the island. I think we're going to hear a lot more of this real people kind of story. So if we can move forward as quickly as we can and overcome those administrative hurdles, I think it would be really helpful to Washingtonians and Oregonians. So. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me, Commissioner Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. To the team supporting us, looking at the guidance document, looking at the schedule, it seems reasonable. I know, thinking specifically about the Washington Low Income Toll Program, the Washington Commission just adopted a program within the last 2 months. The department in Washington is now in the process of standing up the administrative side. So I think, like in that example, there's a framework of a program that presumptively would be the program that's going to be deployed. And so then the question is just, timing. And I think, Mr. Co-Chair, as you mentioned, the timing question is an important question. That's something that should be modeled and then, reference back to administrative capacity, et cetera. So I'm comfortable with the schedule. Having reviewed some of the prior meetings, I know a lot of work has been done. So I think there's a prism here where we can approach recommendations by this fall. The only practical constraint would be what else we put on the table for the team to review, and do you have the capacity to turn the crank and review it? So I want to be responsive to the staff side in terms of lead up to legislative session. If there are any, not that practically I think affects us per se, but if there were to be pinch points in terms of time and capacity on your side, just keep us in the loop, because I think as a group we can work together to get to the recommendation phase. I see the urgency, certainly, if there's going to be a stand-up of a program commencement with construction. So there is a window here. You presented that to us. So I'm committed to support the team and giving as clear guidance as we possibly can.
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on, staff.
Okay, I think Commissioner Ransom's comments were a good transition to having Travis walk through the work plan there. Make sure, let's see if there's any questions on that piece.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Travis Brower. I am ODOT's Deputy Director. And just for one note on the previous conversation about authority to toll the I-205 bridge, I will note that while the Washington legislature has prohibited it, there's also federal statute related to that, specifically 23 USC Section 301 of Title 23, which prohibits tolling on the interstate with some exceptions. That is to say that there are opportunities for the Secretary of Transportation to waive that prohibition for basically it's allowed to toll any bridge that is reconstructed or rebuilt. That's the authority we're using for the interstate bridge. But 205 would not meet that criteria, so it would require special dispensation. So we would need to look at that as well. So just wanted to make folks aware of that, as you've probably heard that in the past. I will walk you through the proposed work plan for this group for this fall. Carl's going to talk about the schedule, and we've kind of worked back from when we need to turn tolling on, which then tells us when the commissions need to approve tolls, which then tells us when we need to go out for public comment. Really, that means that the commissions need to come back together early in 2027 to have another joint meeting to kind of talk through what should be the toll policies and rate plan schedule that goes out for public comment later in the year. So with that said, in order to get that work done by January, you have a pretty extensive amount of work to do in the coming months. So we have calendared out 4 meetings in August, September, October, and November to get through 4 main topics. And I'll note that you'll see there it says a December 2026 meeting may be scheduled if needed to complete identified work tasks. So we hope to be able to get through this in 4 meetings, but if it does spill over into a 5th, just means that during that holiday season, we'll have to add 1 more meeting to the calendar. We recognize that may be needed. So there are 4 main topics that we're going to be working through with you over the course of the next 4 months. One will be toll exemptions and discounts. Another we've already just brought up very briefly is the timing of the low-income toll discount. This group, in working through these questions over the previous iteration of the BTS, generally agreed that there should be a low-income toll discount. The question was mainly when. The third one, and this is a really an overarching set of questions, is the toll rate structure. And there are a whole bunch of subsidiary questions within that. And then last but not least is the approach to public input, what the timing and process will look like, how we go about that important process of asking the public for valuable input on the various options that are in front of you. So our goal would be that, after this meeting where we sort of broach some of these topics, next meeting on September 18th, we start diving in to this in depth. And then again in October, so that in November, you can come forward and approve a set of recommendations or guidance, really, that goes to the two commissions for their review at a January meeting, as there will need to be further discussion there. You may recall that under the guidelines and bylaws of this group, both states' commissions have to concur in order for any toll policy or rate structure to be approved. So you are essentially doing the hard work of working through these issues and then bringing forward options and guidance to the commissions, both of which must concur in order for it to go into effect. So with that, I will turn it over to Carl to discuss the schedule.
Thank you, Travis. So the next slide, we have what are our key future rate setting milestones. We addressed this similarly at the June Joint Commission meeting, but wanted to refresh you on where we stand. As Travis referenced, we really are working back from when we need to start tolling on the current I-5 bridge, and that's projected to be here in summer of 2028. To get there, we have the following steps, which really follow the work you're doing the summer and into the fall and potentially early winter, to provide that guidance to the full commissions for their first coming back together, we anticipate in, say, January of next year, to provide some initial policy, consider some initial policy considerations and potentially some further considerations around the toll rate structure. That really provides an opportunity to begin to do is that in summer through winter, that's what we have identified there, but leading into spring and summer of 27 would be the public engagement on toll rate and policy scenarios to inform the commission's decisions. This would be following the process to really hone in on the specific rate and policy options and elements that would be put together as a scenario that would be supported with that feedback in terms of making some decisions by the full commissions. So to get there, the commissions would release toll rate and policy scenarios for public input in late spring or early summer of next year, leading to commissions issuing toll rate and policy proposal in late summer of 27. That would be the full, after consideration of any options that were put forward to the public there in late spring and early summer. That would lead to the commissions adopting final toll rates and policies in late fall and winter of 27, providing the time necessary to support from an operational standpoint, in particular, being ready to apply those toll rates when the bridges are ready for tolling in the summer of 2028. So that's our rate setting milestones we have in place and we're working towards, and really does, as Travis said, really guides the timeline we have proposed for your work in summer and winter of 26 with the Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee. Happy to address any questions or comments there on the milestones.
Any questions, comments? Not seeing any.
Okay. This is as any factors are updated, we'll certainly revisit this with you at our upcoming Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee meetings. So it's consider this a living document, a living set of milestones, but really is want to ensure that we're driving tightly to what these needs are for the overall intent of starting tolling there in summer 28 and working to refine the processes and the approaches along the way so that we can be ready for that start date.
Thank you. Commissioner Ransom?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Yeah, for the staff team, just a comment of clarity, because I think this is important in terms of public interest and awareness. Summer 2028 assumed start of tolling. And so I think the term assumed most would understand. That's when we could assume the tolling would begin. There is a scenario theoretically or two where construction could begin sooner, again, theoretical or later. And so I think it's just important to say, perhaps, and maybe this is part of our recommendation to the commissions, which is the tolling would commence with the beginning of construction. I believe, based on the schedule, that it probably would be unlikely to occur sooner. But to the extent the program schedule changes, I think it would be an important consideration for this group and the joint commissions to align those two points in time, commencement of construction with the commencement of tolling. I think that's what we've communicated. So again, it's just a point of clarity for anybody that might be interested.
Commissioner, thank you for that comment. That is consistent with project and the state's thinking about when tolling would commence. So we will keep you very much up to date on the progress of the project construction, as that will help inform when tolling will start.
Travis, just a question. The term when construction begins, there's a lot of preliminary work that's going to start happening. What's the definition of when construction begins?
Yes, it will be, commissioners, major construction, not simply, some minor work that is done. So we think it's important that the public begin to see major construction progress happening before they start paying a toll.
And I believe that ties to major construction on the bridge structure itself, as opposed to some other elements of the program, to really tie that connection as closely as possible.
Well, that's sort of clear. Okay.
It's
Anything else
summer
on-
it's summer, and that's intended. There is, as has been noted, there is work to be done to finalize the timelines, and with that, aligning when is the best time to have tolling start, in the realm of aligning it with the start of construction, but also recognizing there are operational considerations to make in terms of installing the equipment and having that be in a functional way, and supporting traffic flow as all happens. So
maybe taking Commissioner Ransom's comments in place to kind of fine tune that language a little bit to say, when major construction begins, which is expected to be summer of 2028.
fair point.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? Don't see it. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is an update on the project. I believe Carly's got that.
That's correct. Good morning, commissioners. Appreciate your time today. I am Carly Francis. I'm the interim program administrator, here to provide a brief update. If we can go to the next slide. So the program has been very busy this year. Folks may remember, but it's worth celebrating many of these highlights. We do have a determination from the Coast Guard about a fixed span bridge that was received in January of this year. There was an updated cost estimate published in March. Our final supplemental environmental impact statement was published in April. And we did, at the very beginning of July, receive the amended record of decision. That is the approval from the federal government to be able to initiate and commence and advance to construction on any components of the project that are covered under the environmental impact statement. So that is the 5-mile body of work that's identified and analyzed in that document, including the river bridges that you were just speaking about. We also did issue a request for qualifications. That is the first step of procurement on the Columbia River Bridge replacement project. That is a combined set of packages. So that request for qualifications was issued on the 17th of August. We had a voluntary submitters meeting yesterday, which had hundreds of both in-person and virtual attendees, and a successful meeting to describe what that procurement process looks like, so folks understand what to expect and what we'll be asking of contractors and others as they participate in that process. Next slide. The amended record of decision received on the 1st of July did respond to, it was a final outcome with respect to the final supplemental environmental impact statement. That document did have some design determinations or recommendations in it. It responded to over 9,000 comments and had also new technical data and identified sort of commitments to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts. There were those recommendations on some specific design options, including items of interest like auxiliary lanes, and then that receipt of the record of decision allowing that advancement to construction. That did also confirm the recommended design options. So those were sort of confirmed in that document and are the framework for how the program moves forward. Next slide. The first funded phase for the program is the work on the Columbia River Bridge replacement itself. That does include constructing that new bridge over the Columbia River that will have a connected bicycle and pedestrian path, width for future light rail on the structure itself. We'll have connections to I-5, so I-5 users, once it's up and ready to use, will transition I-5 over to using that bridge. So folks on the highway will use it as a through connection. It also will connect to Hayden Island and connect to SR14 and remove the existing bridges. In addition to that, we do have funded projects, one associated with transit design to advance the design of transit from the Expo Center up to the waterfront station, the first station in Vancouver. That is part of the process to stay engaged in the capital investment grant program through the Federal Transit Administration. And also, as you've been discussing and as the body of your work, the support for tolling and those infrastructure pieces that are needed to be in place. That is another component of the work. That tolling infrastructure project does include physical components, but also our estimate for establishing tolling does encompass all of the outreach needed, the back office adjustments that are necessary in the technological system, all those pieces and parts to bring forward a fully operating toll structure and interface for the public here in the Portland, Vancouver region. Next slide. So our program schedule at this time, this is our forecast for how things will continue to advance. I've covered the first three of these items. The procurement process will then advance towards issuing a request for proposals late this fall. That will lead to the opportunity to award the contract and negotiate in 2027. So identifying that contract that we would be working with, that forecast of anticipating the start of construction in 2028. I would note, associated with your previous conversation, the start of construction here is really focused on having a guaranteed maximum price with the contractor related to major components of the program. So that really is that certainty about advancing with the contractor on that body of work. And so I think that is a critical component of the tie to toll commencement, which is also forecast to be a similar timeframe. We are advancing with the capital investment grant program through the Federal Transit Administration. So anticipating a full funding grant agreement in 2030. With that, the expectation that a new bridge could be open to traffic 6 to 7 years after construction starts. That certainly is a timeline that needs to be informed by the contractor. So we will be reflecting that as a range until we have a more firm schedule with the contractor. And also forecasting, pending additional funding, the extension of operating light rail into Vancouver in 2036. I think that's the end of my slides. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Carly, I have a question.
Yes.
You issued the RFQ in August on the 17th. It looks like. Do you know yet how much response you got? My concern being that we have enough companies that are willing to take on the project.
Certainly. So this is why we've worked to adjust and revamp and also communicate our procurement process to make sure that folks understand what we'll be looking for in those qualities. So yesterday we spoke about some workshops that would be part of the process and other qualitative assessments that are going to be really key to selecting a contractor. We won't know about participation and the appetite for industry in that process until we complete this. We'll receive the statements of qualifications from interested contractors. That will happen in late September. And then that provides the opportunity to shortlist. So we're in a live process right now, so we don't know how many interested parties there will be through that process, but we're trying to articulate those changes to process, one, to make it's just very clear about not just using sort of price or simple metrics for making the decision and really driving collaboration and transparent pricing and some of these other values that are really, one, successful components of any progressive design build contract, but really essential for making this successful. Trying to drive that into the procurement process so that folks are understanding those values and we're asking them to respond to them during this procurement timeline.
Yeah, I raised that question because there's rumor going around that there's only one company who's willing to take this one on, and I guess the comment I would make is if that proves to be the case, and I hope it's not, that we may want to reconsider what we're doing, how we're doing it.
So I think
But
that
I
the
just
state's
raised that as an issue.
Sure. I think the state's perspective is we're trying to set up a process that can be successful with a single interested party as well as multiple interested parties. So trying to make sure that we have a successful process to advance in either of those cases. And again, that's why sort of driving those qualities in is so important. So one, if we have a single interested party, that we can assess them on those qualities and figure out whether or not they're going to be a viable partner. So I think that's really important to sort of work that into the process before we have that selection to understand, are they going to rise to that occasion or not? So that's really what we're trying to set up so that we don't just decide you have one interested party and you stop early on without doing a full assessment of their capacity to show up in the way that we need for this program.
Thank you. Anybody else? Not seeing anybody. Hey, Carl.
All right, good morning. I'm Ryan LaProuse, the Transportation Planning Lead. I'm going to cover the IVR Program Environmental Transportation Analysis.
Brian, if I could just provide a brief intro, and then I'll hand off to you. I won't steal your thunder in any way, promise. So just wanted to set up for commissioners as we talked through the guidance from the full commissions. Two of the points really addressed looking at more discussion, review of traffic volume forecasts, prepared both for financial planning and for environmental analysis purposes for the corridor, as well as looking at a review of the toll rate amounts and hourly proposed schedule of variable hour toll rates. These two presentations is really intended to support a review of that information, leading off with Ryan speaking to the environmental transportation analysis. Those discussions around diversion, for example, really comes from, in terms of the data that's available, really comes from this work, and Ryan can speak to that. And then the recap of the toll rate scenarios, which will speak to the specific work of the work to prepare for tolling on the I-5 bridge, and what goes into those considerations in terms of traffic and of course revenue. So just wanted to set that up, that these our next two presentations really are meant to be a pair, and we'll kick off with Ryan before moving to the TNR team from WashDOT. So with that, I'm happy to hand off.
Thanks, Carl. Once again, it's Ryan LaProuse, the Transportation Planning Lead. I'll be covering the IVR Program Transportation Analysis that was done for the IVR program. So next slide, please. So existing traffic conditions is what I'm going to start with. So the IBR program area contains a diverse transportation system, including freeways, highways, local roads, transit, active transportation, and programs for both traffic demand management and transportation system management. Comprehensive and quality data provides the foundation for a robust transportation analysis. We had a little impact during our collection, though. So we had the COVID pandemic began in 2020, kind of altered historical travel patterns and trends, traffic volumes, and transit ridership in the region and in the primary study area. And due to that influence of the COVID-19 pandemic on travel patterns between 2020 and 2023, the federal agencies and the local leads all supported using 2019 as the baseline year for existing conditions in the environmental analysis. We also got questions from the feds and the locals about how are volumes kind of in 2023 to 2025 timeframe, and those aligned with those previous 2019 volumes. So they all felt confident in using 2019 as kind of the existing conditions data. Next slide. So traffic counts and traffic data are used to inform the analysis. This included traffic counts, volumes, speed data, and origin destination data. Traffic counts were collected at multiple locations to inform this analysis, including the I-205 Glen Jackson Bridge. Speed data was also collected throughout the corridors on I-5 and I-205, and that was provided by INRIX, which provides speed data to both ODOT and WashDOT. And then in addition to that, we collected origin destination data to kind of understand the patterns of users that use the I-5 bridge, the I-205 bridge, as well as the I-5 bridge program kind of ramps and influences. So I'll summarize that data here in a little bit. So next slide. This slide shows the average 2019 average weekday traffic volumes. As you can see, the plot on the right kind of shows the I-5 bridge volume on an average weekday versus the I-205 Glen Jackson Bridge volume on a weekday. And Glen Jackson Bridge currently carries about 18% more traffic than I-5. So for the total river crossing, I-5 is carrying 45% of the traffic and I-205 is carrying 55% of the traffic. These plots and those little bar charts also show the general purpose traffic in kind of the dark blue, and then the amount of truck volume kind of in the turquoise on the top of the bar. So trucks represent about 10% of the current I-5 bridge traffic, but less than 7% of the I-205 Glen Jackson Bridge traffic. Overall, trucks carry about 8%. And then just kind of reference to give you that as the total. I-205 is carrying almost 170,000 average weekday users a day, and the I-5 bridge is carrying a little over 143,000 users each weekday. Next slide, please. Next, we want to understand the speeds that are kind of using the current bridge and the freeway systems and how they're getting impacted. Because there's only 2 river crossings in the Portland metro region, we're summarizing both the I-5 and I-205. The I-205 Glen Jackson Bridge is about 6 miles to the east of the Interstate Bridge. And it's the only other crossing in the Portland metro region. It's particularly used for east side suburban areas, and because it provides less of a direct link between both the cities of Portland, downtown urban area, and the downtown urban area of Vancouver, as well as both ports. As you can see, the graph on the left is summarizing the AM southbound flows as well as westbound flows, and you can see showing it shows speeds in different colors. And as you can see, the I-5 bridge and the I-205 Glen Jackson Bridge are both showing congested speeds, with the I-5 bridge congestion lasting about 3 hours in the morning, and actually south of the bridge, congestion is lasting for about 6 hours. You can also see the east-west I-84, so people coming in, if they would like to, coming in off of I-205 and going to the downtown Portland, they're also driving in a congested corridor there on I-84. In the off-peak period, the one on the right, that's showing the northbound or eastbound flows. The flows are relatively free flow in the off-peak direction of northbound or eastbound in the AM peak. Next slide. Next, I'm going to talk about the PM peak, and you can see the graph on the right is showing the flows going northbound, and the graph on the left is showing the flows going southbound. As you can see, the graph on the right showing the northbound speed. Shows both bridges are congested currently. The I-5 bridge is congested for almost 9 hours today, from 11 a.m. to about 8 p.m. It's congested. And actually the I-205 bridge is congested almost 7 hours today, kind of mostly in that PM afternoon period. In addition, please note that the I-84 is also congested, kind of heading out to those flows. So people traveling out to 205 from the downtown Portland core who are trying to get to the eastern suburban area of Vancouver have to travel that, and similar other east-west corridors are also congested. In the off-peak period, looking at the southbound flows, you can see the bridges are free flow, but there's some congestion south of the bridges in the off-peak direction even today in 2019. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to talk about kind of origin and destination patterns. This graphic was developed to kind of look at the regional origin destination patterns. As you can see, the I-5 interstate bridge, as I've told you, carries about 45% of the travel. There's this figure showing a primary market and a choice market. The primary market reflects people who are based on their origin and destination have a primary bridge that they use to make that trip. The choice market reflects people who have an origin or destination that would allow them to consider to shift to the opposite bridge, depending on accessibility, availability of the mode to complete that trip, or traffic conditions, including tolls and congestion. 71% of the I-5 bridge users are kind of in that primary market, and then the remaining 29% of the I-5 trips have an origin or destination in locations where a toll might cause them to use to choose the I-205 crossing. And of the 55% of the users who are using the Glenn Jackson Bridge, about 87% of those foundly support using the I-205 bridge, and the other 13% could shift depending on improvements to the I-5 bridge, as well as multimodal improvements in addition. So this is kind of discussing the origin destination for the regional patterns. The next slide will talk about the I-5 bridge specific patterns. So if we go to the next slide for me. So this one is talking about the users who get on or off at any of the ramps within the 5-mile interstate bridge program. And as you can see, 86% of the southbound I-5 traffic through the IBR program enters and or exits an IBR program interchange during the AM peak period. So what this is trying to tell you is a lot of people want to use one of those ramps to get on and or off within the bridge influence area. So only about 14% are through trips north of 500 all the way south of Columbia Boulevard. So it's showing that there's a lot of interaction getting on in downtown Vancouver or one of the major interchanges, and then getting off as soon as they get south of the bridge at one of the major interchanges in the bridge influence area. Next slide. This one is showing the opposite time period. This is showing the PM peak period. This is northbound in a similar fashion. There's only about 23% of the total users go from south of Columbia Boulevard all the way north of 500. The other 77% get on and or off at one of the interchanges within the influence area. So Marine Drive, Hayden Island, SR14, Mill Plain, Fourth Plain, 500. Those users are using those ramps. So very big influence of both the ports as well as the cities. And this is what that's showing you. So that's kind of summarizing. Next slide, please. So that's summarizing the understanding of our existing 2019 traffic additions for both volumes, speeds, and origin and destination. Next, I'm going to talk about the kind of forecasting and diversion that was done for the IBR program, environmental analysis. So as I get into this, there's two traffic forecasts are tailored for different objectives. There's two kind of major forecasts. There's traffic forecasts for environmental analysis and design considerations, which I'm going to talk about in my presentation, and then Brent and team will talk about the traffic and revenue forecast done for financial planning. So the traffic forecast for environmental analysis and design considering the typical weekday traffic impacts, and they forecast higher traffic volumes to account for the peak operational impacts to avoid the understating possible impacts and to support the design needs. So this is what this is getting at, is using all that speed data, volume data, origin destination information that I just presented is getting put into the traffic forecast and then run in the traffic operations analysis. So let's go to the next slide. So environmental analysis traffic forecasts includes the regional travel demand model and traffic forecasting. So the regional travel demand models and traffic forecasting serve different but related purposes. The regional travel demand model forecasts when, where, why, and how people travel in the region. We then take that information from the regional travel demand model and develop traffic forecasts for specific roadways, time periods, project level planning, design, and we use those for environmental studies. So that's kind of a quick summary of what's been done for the environmental traffic forecasts. We go to the next slide. So diversion, this is talking about what happens in response to tolls. So diversion can take many forms. There's users can take an alternative route, such as I-205, for example, as a kind of, or one alternative route to get across the bridge. They can take an alternative mode. So the IBR program includes high capacity transit, both express bus as well as LRT. So that's what that's talking about, their alternative modes, as well as active transportation improvements. They could pick a different destination. Maybe they don't cross the river. Maybe if their east side user will come into downtown Portland or downtown Vancouver versus crossing the river for their typical trip. They can change their trip to a lower cost time of day. So the tolling is rates are a different time of day or different prices. So they might be able to link their trips or have their trip occur during the middle of the day if that's possible for them. And they can change their frequency of the trip making. Or all those are responses to tolling. So go to the next slide. So as discussed, toll diversion can take many forms. Tolling will result in travelers making different choices, changes in the mode of travel, skipping those optional trips, changes in a route or destination, which could include diverting to I-205. Multimodal transportation options combined with the variable rate tolling for the IBR program would result in fewer vehicle trips in total crossing the river in the future, as compared to a no-build condition was one of the findings. And then the environmental analysis showed that diversion to the I-205 bridge in 2045 is anticipated to be relatively small, and it would occur mostly in the off-peak direction. As I showed you earlier, the congested speeds in both the AM southbound and the northbound PM both bridges are relatively congested in the peak period, peak direction. So the majority of this diversion is occurring in the off-peak time period and is relatively small. The I-205 bridge is at capacity and is congested for multiple hours. There's no planned improvements for the I-205 bridge currently. And then I-5 would actually have the same number of lanes as the I-205 crossing once the Columbia River program and IBR is completed. So that is my summary for my quick recap of the environmental traffic analysis. And I'll stop there for questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Baker.
Thanks, Ryan. It's really interesting, and I really appreciate the graphics as well as the data. Thanks. I do have a question about the data collection, and I worry when I see a street light being used as a data collector, because my understanding is that they use cell phone data and data that's coming off the vehicles, and they don't get permission. So I know I'm probably included in that data with the 2 cell phones that I carry when I go across the interstate bridge. But could you speak to what you're doing relative to that data that's been collected, and how we're making sure that it's being used properly or being deleted from the system? Data security obviously is an important piece of everything that we do. So thank you.
Yep, great question, Commissioner Baker. So Streetlight was just kind of a sample. What we do is we get the information outputs. They have a bunch of information about how they anonymize the users for cell phones. Like you said, if people are using 2 cell phones or GPS data from cars. So it's collecting the data. They don't tell us who it is. We don't link this is this user versus that user. They end up giving us outputs and saying this percentage go from this location, kind of transportation analysis zone. So we're able to pull that information in, and then we're comparing that to the regional model. So we're not getting anybody's information individually. It's all anonymized and used kind of big data, and they summarize it in big buckets, I would call it, kind of transportation analysis zones, like Eastern Vancouver, kind of middle of Vancouver, middle of Portland, sub areas, kind of like that. So then we're able to pull that data, summarize it, see how it compares to the regional model, and use that to give us some information on origin to destination patterns.
Anything else? Commissioner Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Ryan, thank you for the report. We had a good conversation as commissioners right at the front end of the meeting, and this question of diversion is, to many, just a matter of great interest, great prediction and hypothesis, and maybe frankly concern. I look at slide 19 and I dwell on that, and I say the best information we have in hand right now is what people do or what patterns suggest based, granted, this is a little bit dated. And beyond this, it's perhaps, and this is my observation, predictive or hypothesis about what somebody may do. As I've shared with the commission, I live in East Vancouver, and within my household, I have a bi-state commuter that commutes on the 205 corridor. So presumptively, they would continue to use that corridor into the future. But in fact, we don't know what they may do. And to me, I think this 20%, if I'm observing this summary, there's going to be a static amount of use of corridors just based on at least behavioral patterns, what people are currently doing, where they're headed, notwithstanding time and money, etc. And there's really only so many people that could change routes. That's what I sort of take away from this slide. Is that basically your argument?
Yeah,
based on what we do know, that there really is only a sliver. Granted, 20%, as it's stated here, is maybe bigger than a sliver, but there's really only a portion of sort of route independence. I could go this corridor, I could go that corridor. And so it sort of narrows the question of diversion.
Commissioner Ransom, that is a great summary of this slide. So yes, this is a limited amount of people have the option or will make that choice, you know, as you're kind of pointing out from the study, and like you're pointing out, this is 2019 data. This is kind of current patterns, who's using those, where is their origin, where's their destination. Obviously they can change, you know, I'm gonna change my destination as we talk about. That's kind of one thing from tolls, but these are those users, and kind of taking in that speed data and other related congestion, as well as the related program improvements. You know, if people want to take transit will be included as part of the IBR program, other things like that. So there are a set number of users who can do this, and these are kind of the choice users who could potentially change based off of their circumstances.
So I'll just go to then the observation within the field of those and the question of diversion. It is an important topic that we should at least have on the table. It is on the table. And then it gets to a predictive future. You're predicting in a later slide, based on a tool that you're using, a certain percentage of diversion. And some might argue that that tool is not correct. And that hypothesis, as somebody might develop it, could suggest a higher rate of diversion. But in fact, we don't know. And so I think it's really, I guess my perspective is it's incumbent upon us to have this issue on the table, to be mindful of what could be a recommendation from this committee to the Joint Commissions, to say standing up an aggressive monitoring program is a minimum within the program. And then the question is, what do you do to respond? And the responses take many forms, and we don't know what those could be. In the example of a toll scenario, it's not even allowed by current statute, both state of Washington and federal. And so I think the response question is interesting because we don't know what those responses may or should be, but we should be monitoring, we should be evaluating, we should be aggressively standing up systems and consideration, and at least have as part of this conversation, a consideration of if there were to be an outcome which we didn't expect, how do we want to react to that? And I think that's an important policy question. But I take away from your analysis, which is we have a range of hypotheses about what the future may be, and we all also have a grounded sort of like, this is what people are doing. And in between that, it's all what I believe or what I think I want to believe about the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else?
If I may add to that, Chair Byer.
Excuse me?
Can I add a comment to Commissioner Ransom's comment?
Go ahead.
Just the aggressive monitoring approach, certainly I'm supportive of that from a perspective of providing that data for both certainly for the program and the region, as well as for our commission rate setting considerations. It really would be in alignment with what we've seen WashDOT take on, say, SR99 on existing toll facilities as they get up and going. SR99 was an example in Seattle, the tunnel really taking a period of time afterwards, in particular, to understand how the traffic is responding, as well as on the Gateway expressways. The WashDOT is currently undertaking that for the 509 expressway to really actively monitor with regional partners how traffic is responding to that facility being up and going, and similar plans are in place for the 167 expressway. So certainly, hear that, and I think we can perhaps have WashDOT more speak to that over time as to how that could be and will be undertaken for the facility for IBR, for the I-5 bridge, both on the Oregon and Washington side.
That's an interesting question. I mean, from Oregon's perspective, we just don't have the experience with tolling. Washington certainly does, and it'd be interesting to hear, and maybe if you have the data from your forecast when you started your tolling projects, how much did that proportion deviate, the diversion? My assumption, what I've heard from other professionals, is that you have diversion at the start, but over about a year or so, people revert to their old patterns. Don't know. Commissioner, you may be muted.
I think I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can hear you now.
Yep, great. Carl, I'm again just a little concerned about monitoring and reacting and how much time that takes. If we take the approach that we're going to monitor and then react, potentially we're talking about years of traffic diversion into those Portland streets. So, if there is, if that's the minimum, that's the minimum. But if there's something that we can do in advance of in terms of our modeling to get a clearer picture of what we expect it would be, I'd really encourage you to do that because these are busy streets. They're there's crosswalks, they're multimodal, there's kids going to school, and so having a problem for multiple years is really going to be difficult if this happens. And I think anecdotally, and then supported here by the data, we're going to see traffic into East Portland on those roads. So anything we could do to encourage a good hard look at it, in advance. I worry that if our solution is monitor and change, we're gonna induce years of very difficult and potentially dangerous situations on the east side. So I'd really encourage you to take a good hard look at it and see if we can do some preventative measures in advance. So just my thoughts.
Commissioner, I have two reactions to that, and this is just, I don't know, but my assumption from working with this is the traffic model may be off, but the question is how far off. It's not likely that it's going to be greatly off, so they have it pegged at, the professionals have it pegged at 20%. Is that really going to be 25% or 15%? We don't know. But the other factor is when you look at the current situation on both bridges, according to the reports that we've seen, both of them are at capacity. So not a lot of room there. I know when I come out of the airport and try to go across 205, whenever I'm up there, I do think about diverting onto 82nd Street, for example. My experience has been is it doesn't help. Anyway, anything else before we move on? Let's move on, Carl.
Okay, I think we have the traffic and revenue recap of the scenarios here coming next. And they perhaps can speak more to the work of I know they'll speak more to the work that goes into the considerations on traffic that are relevant to the traffic and revenue study, as opposed to what Ryan spoke to on the considerations on diversion for the environmental impact analysis study. So I'll pass this to Liz and Brent as the experts here to really speak to this and to support the discussion here going forward.
Thank you, Carl. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Liz Horta from Stantec. I've been leading the traffic and revenue analysis for the level 3 study. And joining me today is Brent Baker, who is the financial lead from WSP, but he also is on the traffic and revenue team as the net revenue lead. So Brent is going to work with me today as we provide our recap of what we're looking at right now, as well as a little bit of history of how we got here. So we'll be going back and forth a bit. So as we move into our recap here, next slide, please. We're going to go through a bit of our process, quick review of the data we've collected. We've presented a lot of this information before, so we're focusing on the recap portion of things, our assumptions, and some of the initial results. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of the overall rate setting process. We will be reviewing the results of the scenarios analyzed right now. Those scenarios are part of an iterative process here. And as the commission is reviewing them, further recommendations can be made for further analysis. And what we're looking at today is our best guess at the moment with the current assumptions. They can be refined down the road to reflect updated rate setting assumptions as this process continues. Next slide, please. The objective of our level 3 traffic and revenue analysis is to provide annual toll traffic and net revenue forecasts. This is key. Our focus, the goal of this study, is net revenue forecasts to support toll rate setting and the adoption of formal toll policy, and then be used to secure a credit rating on proposed debt and support financing. So our goal is that revenue stream, and we want that number to be a dependable number. So our forecast goals for the traffic and revenue study differ somewhat from the goals of the environmental study. Our focus is not on traffic diversion. Our focus is on how much traffic can be relied on to choose the bridge under tolled condition to generate that revenue stream to support financing. Also today, we will touch very briefly on the financial analysis that was conducted by Washington's Office of the State Treasurer and ODOT's debt manager and financial advisor, following on our net revenue forecasts. Next slide, please. So as part of this level 3 traffic and revenue analysis, we reviewed a whole plethora of data, similar to the data that Ryan has presented for the environmental study. We've looked at a lot of the same data. We did collect some independent data. We looked at newer traffic data that's out there, largely consistent with the data that Ryan has presented. We also looked at things like streetlight and other sources to understand patterns, not to plug in directly. We did account for variations in the different data sources. We also worked to develop with a sub-consultant land use forecasts that inform future demand in this area across the Columbia River. And we also conducted a stated preference survey of passenger cars and commercial vehicles on the I-5 bridge to understand how they may respond to tolling. We've developed modeling tools. We use a regional demand model that pivots off of those land use forecasts for future demand that was working in partnership with Oregon Metro. We also pull that through our toll route choice model, and then we further process and review for reasonability in comparison to all of the data available to create annual forecasts of traffic and revenue. So it's a complex process to get to that revenue stream on the I-5 bridge under tolled conditions. Next slide, please. Our current assumptions follow the 4 toll rate scenarios that have been approved and recommended by the joint Oregon and Washington commissions in October 2024. We will spend some more time going through those specific toll rate assumptions in a few moments. We are assuming that pre-completion tolling will start on July 1st, 2028. We know that it's planned for that summer in line with when construction begins, so this timeline could change. This is what we've assumed for the numbers we're looking at today. We've also assumed that post-completion tolling will begin on the new facility July 1st, 2035, which is fiscal year 2036 in the graphics that will follow. During the pre-completion period, overnight hours are assumed to be operated toll-free. On the new facility, when it opens, overnight will be tolled. And our latest forecast here does assume that WashDOT will be the toll administrator, and it has been updated to include things such as bridge insurance costs, which are also, subject to continued conversations, but there is an assumption placeholder here. Next slide, please. For a bit of history and how we got to the 4 scenarios that we'll be discussing today, I'm going to hand it over to Brent Baker, and he can talk you through how we got here.
Yeah, so the 4 scenarios that were developed by this group, by State Tolling Subcommittee, really are building upon the analysis of 10 scenarios from the prior level 2 toll traffic and revenue study. And so these scenarios were developed around what we've learned in the prior study, as well as with the funding targets in mind that the IBR program needs to get from tolling. And so there's this, as we worked with you through those, we are balancing that ability to meet those performance objectives, traffic, and support the necessary funding. Those scenarios, as you know, were developed and then approved by both commissions. So let's talk about the scenarios for a moment on the next slide. I know you've seen this before, but a review might be helpful. First of all, one key thing to note here is that the toll rate ranges shown on the left-hand part of the table are in today's dollars. Those are today's prices, 2026 dollars. And there are some escalation policies we'll talk about in a minute. The weekdays have ultimately 4 steps in all scenarios, 4 different toll rates in the variation by time of day. And then weekends have either 2 or 3 steps as noted in the 3rd column. Liz mentioned that overnight tolling doesn't happen during pre-completion period, so tolls effectively 0 from the hours of 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. Scenarios 1, 2, and 3, when we worked with you back in 2024, they were all developed to reach the same funding target of then $1.25 billion. While scenario 4 was analyzed at your direction to test a higher level of funding targeting $1.6 billion. All of the scenarios include some form of toll escalation. Scenarios 1 through 3 assume annual escalation at 2.15% per year, intended to keep pace with general inflation. Whereas scenario 4 assumes a lower rate of inflation at 3% every 2 years, so effectively lower on an annual basis. And that's kind of combined with its higher initial toll. So higher initial tolls there, but a little bit lower rate of escalation. And we'll see what that does to the revenue stream over time in a moment. Also, just a couple other notes about comparing scenarios 1, 2, and 3. Scenario 1 pairs lower tolls with higher truck toll multipliers. The other scenarios match the somewhat lower WashDOT truck toll multipliers in place today. Scenario 3, compared to scenario 2, trades higher pre-completion tolls for lower post-completion tolls on weekends, that 2-step weekend toll structure instead of 3. So on the next slide, we're going to show you what happens when the tolls are escalated to various points in time. So we're going to use scenario 2 as a representative example. And first thing to note here is you can see that the toll is 0 during those overnight hours. But the rates and the ranges shown here are slightly higher than they were in the table on the previous slide because they've been escalated to 2028 or fiscal year 2029 dollars now that tolling is scheduled to start in the summer of 2028. And so you can see how the tolls vary. The purple or blue bars represent the 3 steps of the weekend toll schedule, and the green bars represent the steps for the weekday toll schedule. Again, you'll see that there's sort of a little bit of a cliff at both ends of the toll rate schedule for the overnight period where we have no tolls. The following slide then shows what the toll rates would look like when the new bridge opens for scenario 2. So scenario 2 did have a step up in tolls that was sort of beyond what would have been happening just from escalation. That was a feature that scenario 2 had to start with lower tolls during pre-completion. And you can see now that overnight's period is tolled with a minimum toll of 205. And then tolls would step up and down on weekdays to as high as 475 and on weekends to as high as 375 in the summer of 2035 in that year's dollars. So on the next slide, I'm going to turn it back to Liz, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the other policies that were noted on the table of the toll scenarios, particularly those around discounts and exemption programs. Liz?
Thank you, Brent. All scenarios do include some level of discount or exemption program assumptions. All scenarios include a low-income toll discount program. And for all of those scenarios, it is a 50% discount for eligible low-income customers, and they are eligible with household incomes within 200% of the federal poverty line and a registered account. They need to have an account to receive the discount. And they must opt in. They must show that they are low income. Exactly how they do that, I think, is still being worked out with WashDOT. When the toll discount program begins varies by scenarios. 2 of them have the discount beginning on the day tolling begins, and 2 of them assume that the discount will begin when the new facility comes online, so post-completion. Also included in all scenarios is existing WashDOT tribal preemptions. The Yakima and Nez Perce tribes have treaty language for right of free passage, and working with both existing Washington and Oregon laws, there is an assumed exemption for emergency vehicles, maintenance vehicles, and organized militia vehicles on the bridge. The 4 scenarios that we're looking at today do not include other tribal toll discounts and exemptions, but there were some sensitivities conducted on scenario 2, where we did look into 2 discount options, a 50% or a 100% discount for qualifying tribal members with 2 different eligibility options. One is considered limited with about 10 tribes that are actively engaged with the IBR program, and a statewide option that allows more tribes to be eligible. So we're not going to get into those details today, but that is also something that has been analyzed. Next slide, please. This slide is showing the total annual transactions resulting from our toll analysis for the 4 scenarios. Overall, the results of these 4 scenarios, by design, generate very similar traffic. Scenarios 2 and 3 are almost right on top of each other, if you look at the blue and the green lines there. Scenario 1 has the highest traffic, which corresponds to the lowest toll rate in those early years. Scenario 4, on the other hand, has the highest toll rate, and therefore you see that purple line is the lowest traffic, as a few more people are avoiding paying that higher toll rate. Over time, scenario 4 does have that lower annual toll escalation rate on average, with the 3% every 2 years. So over time, those toll rates do equalize a bit between the 4 scenarios, and in the outer years, they're very similar. Any questions there? Okay, next slide, please. All of our scenarios do consider toll avoidance. When tolling is introduced on the I-5 interstate bridge, traffic is expected to respond in a variety of ways, as was discussed by Ryan when he was going through the environmental analysis. Traffic diversion or avoidance of tolls and the effect on the transportation network is documented and captured in the environmental documentation. That is not the goal of the revenue forecast study. The purpose of this TNR study is to project a conservative number of trips that will use the I-5 bridge once tolling is implemented, and therefore estimate an achievable toll revenue generation forecast. To reasonably project bridge use under tolled conditions, the study does account for this toll avoidance. However, the focus of the study is the projection of trips on the tolled bridge and not projection of trips on other facilities. And this study does allow for a period of transition as the community adjusts to tolling. As Ryan presented, there is that choice market, people who can reasonably change their traffic choice. There's also perhaps a period of transition where people go out of their way to avoid tolls temporarily. So that is incorporated into our study. The choice market represents the people who can reasonably change bridges, whereas there may be some other people who are willing to travel a large extra distance for a little while to avoid that toll, but eventually it returns more to an equalized value decision. And to go through how our estimates of traffic translate to net revenue, I'm going to hand it back over to Brent.
Thanks, Liz. Next slide, please. So the traffic forecasts that Liz discussed, that level of traffic that we can rely upon for revenue and financial planning purposes, that comes in as sort of gross toll revenue potential. And what we're really interested in getting to, what's key here, is the net toll revenues, which is sort of the funds that are available to support capital funding for the project. So those net revenues typically determine how much can be borrowed. And the contract with the lenders, be those bondholders or other institutions lending money, will typically stipulate the uses of toll revenues. So we've anticipated what that will look like in our work with also those doing the financing. And so typically the tolls and fees collected go first to paying for roadway maintenance and toll collection operations and maintenance costs. And so there's a number of steps. There's some fees and miscellaneous fees and other revenues that come in. There's some revenue that goes out because it's either unbillable or uncollectible. And then we capture, there's some revenues might be recaptured, and then there's some, basically the various costs that work us down, everything from the toll collection operation costs to routine bridge and roadway facility maintenance to bridge insurance that Liz mentioned earlier, and card payment fees to allow people to have their accounts tied to a debit or credit card. All those things are adjusted out, and we get to net toll revenue near the bottom of this waterfall. And the uses of those net toll revenues would typically include debt service on the borrowed funds, so money we're going to use to pay for the bridge, as well as money we might use directly to pay for construction, known as pay-as-you-go, as well as deposits to various reserve accounts that serve as rainy day funds for unanticipated things that might come along, such as a pandemic. So anyway, on the next slide, we can show you what those net revenue projections look like. And as I mentioned earlier, the scenarios 1, 2, and 3 were all intended to reach that $1.25 billion toll funding target. That's now been stretched a bit further in the financial plan, as I'll get to in a minute. But you can see here that they have very similar net toll revenues. Scenario 4, in that purple line, has higher net revenues and therefore would have some higher funding potential. Although it does, when you get way out in time, its net revenues drop a little bit below the others because of that lower rate of toll escalation that Liz mentioned. To get to these net revenues, again, just briefly noting here, there's a series of reductions that are taken from it, some increases that are added, and then there are those costs. Some of those costs are unique to the interstate bridge. such as the maintenance of that bridge itself and the toll equipment on the bridge and the insurance premiums for the bridge. But there's also a need to pay for a share of WashDOT's system-wide toll costs. And adding I-5 to the system of toll facilities, there's a back office system and customer service center operations, those vendors that help the agency through the collection of the tolls and dealing with managing customer accounts and those sorts of things. There's a share of that is allocated to I-5 equitably based upon the level of transactions that it represents within the whole system. Okay, so I think now we can transition to what we would like to do with these net toll revenues. And the IBR financial plan now includes a need for $1.5 billion in toll funding. Washington's Office of the State Treasurer, as well as ODOT's debt manager and their municipal advisor, have independently analyzed the ability of the net revenues from scenario 2 to support that level of funding, that 1.5 billion, which is, again, a bit more than they were initially targeting, but that's what the current need is for the financial plan. And so that has been independently verified for scenario 2. Now we know that scenarios 1 and 3 have very similar net revenues, so we would expect them to have very similar funding capacity, but I will just note that only scenario 2 among those 3 has been analyzed by the finance folks. And then I think it's just important to reiterate that notwithstanding that work, the level 3 TNR forecasts and with the net toll revenue projections that come out of that will be updated as you and the full state commissions in both states finalize the toll rates and policies prior to formal adoption. So there will be another chance to run the full analysis and confirm expectations that we are still financially solvent and that the toll revenues are sufficient to meet all of those financial obligations, including the debt service on the borrowed funds. So that will all be reconfirmed. So I think we can just wrap up now on the last slide here, and Carl, and I'll turn it back to you. So obviously the TNR team has analyzed these 4 scenarios from at your direction. The states have completed their analysis, confirming that at least scenario 2 provides that 1.5 billion, and now the 2 commissions have provided guidance to you, the Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee, regarding some rate-setting policies for the interstate bridge. And so we look forward to continuing to work with you on this as we move toward that formal rate-setting process. Carl, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Brent. I think primarily, we want to hear if there are questions from our commissioners on that presentation, maybe in consideration of the 2 presentations you've heard here today from Ryan and then from Brent and Liz.
I just wanted to comment that on both presentations, it was very clear. You're getting clear on where we need to go and what the information behind it is. So I truly appreciate that. Maybe I'm just learning more about tolling. Commissioners, do you have comments, questions? Not seeing any. Commissioner Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Yeah. Comments, probably few. Questions, probably many. One, I recognize that the subcommittee in getting us to this point has actually done a lot of the work. And so it would be my expectation that we're not going to redo that work or ask the team to really substantively reconsider scenarios, but that's my assumption. Among those scenarios presented, it seems like there are really only a few, in my opinion, that are worthy of maybe further refinement, if there is that. So I think maybe the question for the team and for the co-chairs would be, as we navigate through the next couple of meetings, how do we consider the process of walking through the recommendation? There are some areas, for example, where I think a recommendation is at hand or guidance is at hand. There are other areas that need more review, perhaps. So just process-wise, maybe the team could just sort of help us navigate as we formulate our ideas, how we bring this to the table.
Carl, do you want to take that one on?
Sure thing. Appreciate those thoughts, Commissioner Ransom. As in our work plan, we have several items identified for September 18th for discussion and refining options. One is to lead off on one where we think there's been perhaps the most kind of consistency and direction from the Bi-State Tolling Subcommittee and the full commissions would be around the standard toll exemptions that are currently in place for Washington State, for example, in terms of emergency vehicles and how those are applied, as well as, say, tow trucks and other support vehicles, just to use some examples, some of those items that were addressed by Liz in her presentation, as well as how to align, say, requirements in Oregon and requirements in Washington in regards to exemptions, such as the exemption regarding the National Guard for Oregon, how to apply that consistently across the bridges on both sides of the water, for example, as well as the prohibition of an exemption for transit that's in place for Washington right now on tolled bridges, considering that for both sides. That'd be an example, if assuming that there's continued kind of alignment with prior deliberations, to advance that on the 18th for kind of perhaps check the box on initial guidance from the BTS on those topics. Another example would be following up that we talked about earlier on, there is bringing forward some of that testing around when impacts of a low-income scenario happening. A low-income program being applied for scenario 2, the one that has gone through the full financial analysis, bringing back some of those impacts on that initial testing for your further discussion to help identify where you may be on the possibility of including that as part of your guidance. Those are two examples. Toll rate structure, we can certainly, if there's feedback today on how to think about that, for example, on what to do with scenario 4, is that something that we keep on the table for further consideration or not, be that it reaches a higher revenue target, or if there's other considerations you want us to help bring back to you on the 18th, open for that feedback, but really working through those kind of refining so we can get to that November date where we identify BTS guidance, helping to check those boxes along the way, if the BTS is ready to support that feedback, that full guidance being provided in November.
I would comment because I think that mostly everybody's new except me from when we started this. I was the one who encouraged that we do scenario 4, and essentially that was to have some information available to the commissions should the construction costs push beyond the 1.5. So we at least had some information to deal with that in the future. Commissioner Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Carl, I'm going to maybe just add a little bit to Commissioner Ransom's comment about process. As it relates to the really important and really sensitive issues around the tribes, how do we approach this? How do we wrap our arms around this and work towards a decision? I know that there's a lot of complexities, and I mean, it's just so important on so many levels.
Sure. Two tracks taking place on this. As we know, that the discussion or the decision making, I should say, on the tribal exemptions or discounts won't be part of the public input process. Rather, it's through our consultation process, and then in support of decisions that will be brought forward by the full commission. We do anticipate, that there could be guidance provided by the BTS on how to move forward on the question of analysis, exemptions or discounts for tribal purposes. That would be one where timing would be important to consider where those conversations are with the tribes. We have an intertribal meeting outside of the consultation process. We have an intertribal meeting planned here in September, for example, to support more information sharing and gathering, as well as some ongoing consultations taking place. So at a staff level, we're working to identify when we'll be bringing forward that information to the BTS to support in time for that decision or potential guidance in November. Is that helpful there? We certainly can walk through what's been discussed in terms of the sensitivities that have been assessed to date by the team and help you understand those options better. If that's helpful, it certainly would be part of that discussion and refining as we move forward, whether that's September or October for sharing some more of that review of information for you. But really ensuring that before guidance is given, we're working through the process of informing with the tribes and any additional consultation we would have steps we would want to take as well before that.
Okay, thank you.
Travis, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I have nothing else to add.
Anyone else? That's not. Any
Matt,
final comment? Oh,
sorry,
excuse me, Commissioner Ransom.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Yeah, I guess in the interest, if this is the meeting where we express thoughts on could this be studied, I'm willing to at least proffer the question. And I'll phrase the question like this. We've been asked, or people are arguing for a carve out, and there are any number of ways a carve out could be developed. There are carve outs for location. There are carve outs for people that cross multiple times a day. And so when I hear this question, I think, okay, it's a fair question. I would probably pose the same question given a particular circumstance. And then there are two responses we need to provide as commissioners. One is, what's the public purpose that would be served? In the example of low income, that's a carve out by maybe some definition. And the public purpose that I think this commission, certainly the Washington Commission, in adopting a program says is being served is there's recognition of a financial carve out based on somebody's particular circumstance at a given point in time. So then back to the question of carve outs. Could a carve out be developed for somebody based on where they are located, reside, do business, etc.? Is there a carve out that could be put forward for a particular circumstance based on use of a facility? And so those are questions that I think deserve an answer. I believe I know the answer in Washington State, which is that's not a consideration that's being implemented in our programs, because the public purpose being served, writ large, is to serve the public, not to dwell necessarily on particular circumstances. But maybe if the team could just offer, is that even something that can be analyzed? How could that even be administratively managed? Just are there any initial sort of thoughts, and is it worthy of even putting that forward for further analysis?
So this is Travis, and I can give you just some limited thoughts. I don't know that we've really thought about it in any way or looked at these carve outs that are geographic yet on this project. I will note that there has been some federal case law on this, where we would need to examine what the federal requirements are related to the Commerce Clause and how that relates, as there has been some decisions that have, I think, put some sideboards on where you can offer a geographic discount or exemption to tolling, because it is generally expected that you will treat customers similarly situated in a similar manner. So we need to go look at that. I don't want to speak much more on that front. In Oregon, I can speak to the fact that when the Transportation Commission was considering various toll programs 2 and 3 years ago, they declined to put forward any sort of geographical exemption. There are a lot of challenges associated with that, especially in determining who would be eligible for that. And then certainly administering this. WashDOT's toll division frequently reminds me it costs a lot to give something away for free. And I think the administrative challenges with that could be pretty substantial. But I'd also offer to Carl or anyone else from the team to address this issue as well.
I see Ed is on, and I imagine he could speak to some operational considerations to that. From a policy standpoint, I'll note that the commission did have a consideration of a geographic versus a system-wide low-income program for the 509 expressway up in, south of SeaTac. It was the commission's perspective and direction at that time to shift to really approach it as a system-wide discount from a broader equity standpoint, as well as to support the best address what is the functioning of that facility in terms of if users of that facility are really from throughout the area, not just from that region. And so to address it as from a tolling consideration, both a system-wide approach or to address from an equity standpoint, regional equity, for example, but also from a functional standpoint, just that those are people who are using that facility itself are from not just in that area, but from many other places as well. So that's been feedback from the commission on when we did take this up in the past. Ed, if you have more to add from an operational standpoint.
Sure. Thank you, Carl. And thanks for teeing that up, Travis. You're right. There would be administrative costs associated with it. But just off the top of my head, thinking about it, just the initial enrollment and verification process would carry its own complexities and burdens to make sure that we had the right people that we were trying to carve out, if you will, Commissioner Ransom, where they lived, how long they've lived there, and if they continue to live there. So it wouldn't just be the initial enrollment process. It would be ongoing verification for certain geographical areas, perhaps. So that I think would take a lot. There would be audit concerns associated with it as well, to making sure that we're doing things right, and that we were making sure that we didn't have fraudulent activity going on as well, particularly if there was a larger discount. So just, those are some of the things off the top of my head that come to mind. Also, just the ongoing customer service administrative costs and effort too, for people who would call in that wanted to contest their toll based on where they were or where they were at the time of travel, et cetera. So trying to iron all those things out at the beginning and over time, I can see could become pretty complex and administratively have a cost. So just off the top of my head. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Travis.
There's also the basic challenge to the user pay concept. One person's discount is another person's increase in cost, but you can't change the cost of the project.
True.
Other comments? Okay. Carl, Travis, I think we have completed the agenda.
The last
Anything
item on
else?
the agenda was really closing remarks and roundtable. So I think we've effectively started that.
That's what I was trying to do, but.
Yep. And so to your point, I guess if there's any other, other comments or direction or closing considerations from commissioners.
Thank you. Well, to the staff team, thank you for putting this together today. It was very good information, good meeting. Commissioners, thank you for taking time out of your day. And I think we're at the end, so we will adjourn. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.